How's it going, everybody? I'm sitting down with Mike Heath. He's a client of my bosses, Cody and Emily Patterson at Patterson Performance Horses here in Perrin. We're shooting this in their office, so I want to give a thanks to them and shout out. They also stand a stud, Quails Dun Remedy, who's owned by Heart Bar Horses and Cattle. So if you guys are looking for something to breed to, go ahead and give them a check out. He competed in the World's Greatest this last year. And a lot of good size and good mind on those colts. We're getting to ride some of those babies now. Mike is kind of has a lifetime in the non-pro. He has earnings in most major associations, the NRCHA, the NCHA, the NRHA, and AQHA points and earnings. He's been with my bosses, Cody and Emily, for about the last 5 years, and is a non-pro and has a lot of experience and has done some really cool things. And we're just going to kind of dive into that and see what has changed in that world and how to make it a better place for everybody else to get in the middle of it. So why don't you start by telling us kind of where you were born and the early parts and how you first got into the horses.
Okay. Well, born in Central Illinois, and we moved to Ohio, west of Toledo when I was 5, and we lived in town in Illinois, but my father came from a farm, and my mother's family had come from a farm, and so there was horse background and stuff in the family, and then had moved to like I said, Ohio, and when I was 7, and my mother, who is a city girl, and for a long time I thought my father had done this, and then having a discussion with the family, turned out that my mom did it, which was kind of a surprise. She saw a Shetland pony for sale for $25 and came with a bridle and a saddle and a pad, and then so she thought that just looked like a great idea, and you probably know you have kids and you do some kind of stupid things, right? You would never do that.
No, not
until
me.
you have the kids, and then all of a sudden you're just this idiot that just does all these things. But so she goes and she buys the pony, and we don't have a trailer, so she leads it like 2 miles home. And we're on 5 acres, and it's like a really big yard, and the fencing is not horse proof or anything. There's like just a decorative post and rail out front. So they literally got the the screw-in little dog holder things. Have you seen those?
Yeah, where you screw it in the ground.
You screw it in the
hook
ground.
your dog chain up to
You
it.
hook the dog chain up. We'll hook the pony's halter to
A little
that.
bit of spot grazing. And move them around the yard.
Exactly. And I think like the next morning that they got a call from the guy that they bought the pony from and said, so the pony you bought is back here and dragging, kind of a long line. So that's kind of how we just kind of fell into it, and that pony was not very friendly kind of pony as Shetlands can be, and so that
real confidence booster.
Exactly, and
so where did you kind of ride them around? Were you in some just like tilled up farm ground or down by the river, or?
Well, with this pony, it's like 5 acres, and so you have it makes, like I said, a really big yard.
Yeah.
You're just riding around.
Mm-hmm. Were there any other kids you guys would all kind of gang up and take off, or?
Not at this point. So, they didn't get along with that pony that well, and so parents did a little research, and they found a couple little POA ponies and got a really nice, sweet little mare. And then we had moved, or we started in 4-H.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the parents, you know, like they, you know, put kids in T-ball and stuff. Let's
Yep.
sign the kid up for this, and so off we go, and that really helped. I was a little, you know, horse shy from that first pony that was,
Yeah.
you know, tended to be pretty uncooperative. And
Did your parents helping you with that first pony, did they have much horse knowledge, or were you all trying to kind of figure out what to do together? Because I'd imagine when you got to 4-H, having some more people around with and seeing what could be kind of opened your eyes a little bit.
oh yeah, you know, you had older kids that had horses that, and I mean, at this point, you know, I don't know anything from trot, from lope, from any, and you know, what's a lead?
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, you're really starting from the ground up. And I mean, my dad had some horses. He had like a contest or gymkhana horse that, you know, he did some speed event stuff with. But as far as real horsemanship and stuff, didn't know that much. And his dad had actually farmed with horses some. So that goes back quite a few years.
Gotcha.
So there is some horse background, but as far as, you know, pleasure riding and that sort of thing was completely different.
A far cry from the show ring.
Right. And one of the advisors with that 4-H group kind of took me under his wing. I was especially had a problem with loping. I didn't. It just, you know, I didn't understand control of the horse and anything like that, and was pretty reluctant to lope. And the pony's kind of lazy, didn't want to. And you know, so I mean, there's a few moments there where, like, if we had the first pony and didn't get another one, that would have ended it.
Yeah.
And even the second pony, I just had a hard time getting things figured out.
What was the difference in that second pony, like that gave you something you wanted to try again?
Well, really, it was a lot of just cooperation.
Just a friendlier animal to be around.
Exactly. You know, you could ask it to go forward, it would. You'd stop, it'd stop. It wouldn't just drop its head and try to let you fall off or anything like that.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So it was, you know, something that we, you know, is safer, you know, among other things. But yeah, like Roy Russell had taken me aside and really encouraged me and kind of got me where I would lope the pony and stuff.
Yeah.
And then the pony would, you know, it showed so 11 and under and 48-inch under pony.
And were you doing like trail classes or halter stuff? What kind of stuff did they do for 4-H back then?
Well, most people kind of went one of two options. So this is a lot of people with backyard horses that have a couple acres to 10 acres, a lot of 5 acres in a house, little barn, and, you know, neighborhood. We had moved from one point to another, and I did have now neighbors that had some horses, you know, and ponies that were around my age. So we had those kids to ride with, which of course makes it more fun when you
absolutely,
you got more people to do things with. But we kind of went the show ring, halter, showmanship, pleasure, horsemanship, and reining. But, you know, at this level, you're just trying to get through your do circles and get lead changes. And, you know, a lot of people didn't even do a flying lead change.
Yeah.
You know, and just there were no sliding stops at this level. You just get them to stop and turn around and go the other way.
And what year would this be roughly?
That'd be like 72, 73, somewhere.
Has the West Coast and the East Coast style of horsemanship kind of collided yet in this time? Like,
oh no,
it's still pretty separate worlds.
Yeah, so just kind of jumping ahead a little bit. You know, I did okay with the pony, and I learned, and then we graduated into some horses. And, you know, something that, you know, you might hear on a lot of podcasts, and especially, you know, with your ranching background, they talked about, you know, horses that were bred for tough country, and they're tough horses, and they're pretty rank, and all that sort of thing. And then they made they've made a change in horses, which we can talk about in a little bit. But these horses that we had were really kind of just the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
They were not very athletic, and they were really, you tended to have horses that were more bred, not so much to maximize their performance, but hey, this is a really nice horse. It's easy to get along with.
Mm-hmm.
The kids love this horse. It just does all these things. And so, like these horses are pretty lazy, and, your ability to do a fast circle, would have been a really big deal to a horse that's just used to just pony loping along and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. So you had some kind of cool success early on, didn't you? At 13, you had a good win, right?
Well, so kind of going back, and this is in the 70s, and we live in Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
which, reining was really coming, getting off the ground.
Where are kind of the hot spots back then? It wasn't in Texas yet, was it?
No. Texas was, to my knowledge, we hadn't been into Texas yet. But, that was a lot of rodeo and roping and stuff like that, ranching.
Yeah.
And so the Quarter Horse Congress is held in Columbus, Ohio,
Okay.
which is only a couple hours from where we lived. And it's, world's largest all-breed horse show. And the NRHA futurity used to be during the Congress.
Okay.
And my dad, as being a 4-H advisor and stuff like that, he'd gotten more interested. And just some vacation from work, he got a little camper and went down to the Congress and spent a week there. And watching those, the fraternity horses go, and, happened to be there to watch like the Billhorn versus Billhorn runoff that was pretty famous, and just saw that live. And he kind of got a reining bug, but he really wasn't doing a lot of riding. But he found a horse for me and bought it. That he bought one horse, pretty nice horse. That horse had colicked, and real sad story there.
Yeah.
But then he turned around and bought another horse from this trainer, Randy Fowler in Indiana. And back then, Randy was pretty big NRHA guy and consistent finalist in the futurity and that sort of thing. And we had been to the house with that first horse and had actually kind of seen this horse, but didn't know anything about it at the time. But so this horse that he had was made finals of the reigning futurity on it, but he was trying to sell it, but there really wasn't a lot of buyers because the horse was very small for a reiner of the day. He was 14.2. So now
The times have changed.
yeah, times have changed. We got 14-1 horses that are running 9-0 down the fence now, and it's a little different world. But so we bought that horse and then take it home, and I'm just riding it and trying to figure out, and we would spend some time, at Randy's, and then also there are a lot of other trainers. You've got like your Clark Bradleys and a few other people that kind of lived in the area, and you could go take lessons from them. And that at the time they were, maybe some had some wins, and a lot of those guys later, became famous. But just kind of working your way with lessons where you can get it, and and we had been still continue to show 4-H, and then I took this horse from the futurity, and at this point I was really into riding. I rode like pretty much every day. In fact, my parents had to kind of set some limitations on how much I was allowed to ride because they couldn't keep weight on the horse. He was just getting ridden so much, loping so many circles and stuff. But I was doing 4-H with him and horsemanship and that. and had actually won the, you know, back then it was a big deal to go to the county fair. 88 counties in Ohio, and every single one had a fair, and you would qualify and then go down to state fair and show, and so I think I'm 13, 14 at that point, and I won the 14 and under reining, which was kind of a given for the higher caliber horse I had. But then I also won horsemanship, on this horse that 2 years before had finaled in the reining fraternity. So, but it's a really well broke horse, and in those days, now horsemanship, the loping horse is about the speed that you would walk. But back then that wasn't the case. The horses moved out more and that. But
what did you notice when you got that horse? As far what did that horse teach you specifically, if you can remember? Just because I know for me, before I came to Cody and Emily, I was starting a lot of stuff, and there were some good ranch horses, but really the high-end horses I got to be on were few and far between. And I know that, just in the first month I was here, just having a horse with this type of mental capacity changed everything for me.
And that's the case here. I mean, this horse was just very considerate. It was very willing. It also run down and slide 40, 45 foot if you're running.
Back then, were they a little more aggressive with the plates they'd put on horses?
You could run, well, I mean, I've got, an inch plate on my mare now. I mean, usually we're running 3/4, but one it's about an inch. And this horse was probably running an inch. The bigger difference was, this is really before bridling up became a thing. You're running your circles, you just, drape the horse out there, and they would, really fast circle, they would really stick their nose forward, and your run down and stops, you just, we really weren't breaking at the shoulders and
more of
any
a
elevation. It's more of a just
natural headset.
Well, no.
Or were you adjusting, or would you find where they were comfortable running the hardest?
Really, you just sent them.
And just put your hand down and go.
A lot of horses would kind of naturally run, pick up their head. You say go, and they pick up their head and they go, and you just let them go. But now, the ground was a lot different. Some of the best ground, my favorite places to show, kind of had more of a, like a racetrack surface, like the trotters and pacers and stuff run on. It's got kind of tiny little pea gravel, and there's not much surface to it. And they would just run down, and the horses didn't stop real deep. They kind of skated across the ground and walked on the front end. That's still several years before some of the California influence of having the horses bridled up and really dropping their hocks in the ground.
What were the arenas that you rode in then versus now, the ground? I am assuming that not every place had, better ground brought in, a lot of natural ground just worked up and the rocks picked out of it the best they could. I mean,
well, sort of the ground at the Ohio State Fairgrounds where they had the Congress, that would be actual show ground. It still was not nearly as deep as what we would run in a cow horse or a reining event now. And those events, they would actually have a drag.
Okay.
Through the 70s at a quarter horse show, even in a regular arena, there's no drag there. The rail horses have been going all day.
Yeah.
They did halter and stuff in the morning, and then the rail classes, and then you just ran your reiner. As is, go. There's even sometimes some of the smaller shows I know there's a few that were held at maybe like a schoolyard, which is grass. And they would literally have posts that were old tire and a 4x4 set in concrete, and they pull those posts out there, make a ring, put a big old rope, loop it around each one, and that's your arena. So now you got your inch plates on,
Yeah.
and you do your circles, and you don't really run down for that. You kind of lope them down, say whoa, turn them around, because that kind of plate on grass, you're just looking to fall down. So you
Absolutely.
you back off and be safe about it. But yeah, so that's much different then.
So to kind of get back a little bit to the question I was getting at was, I don't know if we quite made it all the way to you winning the youth congress there, and more specifically at what specifically you did win, if it was a specific class or what.
Well, with this nicer horse, and I'm spending a lot of time riding, and the horse is teaching me a lot. And like I said, I've got various trainers that have helped me with some things, and we started showing AQHA. At the time, NRHA was just open and the non-pro. There's no limited, no youth, anything like that. And also, like now, those tend to be fewer events in various cities. Whereas the quarter horse shows, we were just kind of going all over Ohio. So, an hour here, 2 hours there, kind of thing. And it's, a lot shorter distances than that. And you had the youth that you could run against. But anyway, some of the big things, the big deals in quarter horse and youth were youth teams. So a major event at the Quarter Horse Congress, you had several events that youth teams competed in. So like we had, and Ohio was really big in quarter horse shows at the time, one of the, if not the major state, certainly one of them. And being in town, or in state, a lot of people really wanted to go and be on a youth team. So not only was there an Ohio youth team, they had a Northern Ohio and a Southern Ohio, and the Ohio one got first choice. And then if you weren't one of the top two in your event there, if you're Northern, you could go Northern or Southern. And that was a pretty prestigious thing. We all had our youth team coats that we wore around all week, and camaraderie with the kids and everything. And so now we've moved up. I'm like 17. I had done Northern Ohio youth team, and I made Ohio youth team. And then at the Congress, the one year I took second in the team tournament reining, and then a day or two later I won the 14 through 18 reining. So, that was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
The Quarter Horse Congress and like Youth World Show were by far the two major events of the day. So
what did how old were you? 13 or 14 when that happened?
No, I was 17 when I won the Congress. Yeah.
17. Okay. And so what 17, so you're getting ready to wrap up high school and time to make some decisions about what you're going to be doing. What was high school like? Aside from showing horses, were you doing anything else?
No, not really. It's
pretty just ate up with horses.
Yeah, back then I thought I was smart, and I've learned, now that I'm actually not. But I did get really, good grades were easy for me to come by in high school and such, and so, and I was not a real popular kid there, and so I didn't really have. I'd like, once I got old enough to drive, I might go watch a football game, but I didn't really play any of the sports or anything. And so there's a real dichotomy here where I'm one of the least popular kids in my high school, and then especially after I'd been youth teams, and I'd been, the Ohio youth treasurer, and we were involved in some of that stuff.
And probably having some other successes besides that. I mean, you don't just jump straight to that.
Right. Yeah. You had various wins and such, and
That must have been kind of confusing at a young age, being, going to your everyday at school, and like you say, I mean, not to harp on, but I can relate too. I wasn't the most popular guy either. There was a lot of people that could care less what I was up to, and to have that at one part of your life, and then come over here, and then
you get to the other part, and then you're walking around the Congress, which is, I mean, there's just massive numbers of horses and people and stuff all around, and everybody knows you and calls you by name, and you're like, I don't, hey, friendly, but it's like, I have no idea who this person is, and maybe I've never met him or even seen him before. So,
especially to be a young man and having adults coming up and call you by name, and other trainers that you've been with, and others that are watching programs and thinking, I can imagine that would spin my head around.
It was an interesting high school experience to have both things going on.
So, had you ever considered being a horse trainer?
At about this time, there's a couple of things that I'm thinking about. I thought about being a trainer, and I was doing pretty well, and there's a lot of big names in Ohio and reining at the time.
Is it specific? Are people starting to be specialized as reiners, or are guys still doing it all?
There's a little bit of both. There are people like Randy would have mostly reiners, but there would be a couple of youth horses and stuff that they were riding for people that lived in the area, and they still did other things. Like one summer, I don't know, probably at 15 or 16 years old, the local county fair had this versatility class. And I was over there riding, and they say, "Oh, we're going to go you enter this versatility class." And so, I did like the pleasure, and I won the reining. That's not a real big deal to county fair versatility class. And then I was like third in barrels. And then their daughter, who was 8, rode in the hunt seat part, my reiner in the hunt seat part. I didn't have clothes and stuff, so, they stuck her on there. And, she did a great job while she was. But so there was stuff like that, and
and then you're also starting to see guys kind of, I'm a cutting horse trainer, I'm a reining trainer.
That's starting to specialize. You had some people that were doing mostly halter horses, and the pleasure people started kind of specializing, and but still back then, you had some people like the Doug Lilly that was pretty famous for youth kids and horsemanship and pleasure and that sort of thing. But the guy, he could train and ride a reining horse as well as anybody else could too. Because they had most of those guys had done a lot of those things, and so they knew a good bit about all.
So you hear a lot of people. This is just kind of. I'd like to pause on this for a second, because in other podcasts I hear a lot of people. Clinton Anderson is probably the loudest about it, as he is with a lot of things, about like the all-around type of horsemanship, and like he always gives the example of this such and there's trainers nowadays that can't even get a horse onto a trailer, and back then you'd train the same horse to rein, to versatility, to cut, to rope, to Jim Can, for all of it. And do you see a kind of a more trend with these crossover events and events like the World's Greatest and stuff, where you're doing 4 events, where some of that more like rooted all around horsemanship is kind of making a circle back? Or Is that something you've ever noticed in the several phases I'm sure you've got to experience and witness firsthand?
Yes, it's kind of hard to judge, two different periods of time because the factors are very different in there. Back, when you get into the 70s, like I said earlier, you had your ranch horses that would come out, and those kind of horses were just tough, and I mean you could hardly get them to do things. And then we had a lot of softer horses that we were showing in 4-H and stuff, but they really didn't have a lot of athletic ability and stuff. And so you started seeing more specialized, more breeding and stuff. So
Yeah.
This is probably about the time where they started changing from, I've got this horse, and if you could get it to go slow, it was a pleasure horse. If you couldn't get it to go slow, it just wanted to go fast all the time, then you tried reining on it, kind of thing. But at this point, you're starting to move into, you've got a good reining horse and breeding to another good reining horse, and you're starting to find, some of those connections that are working, and some of those breedings. And this is where all the horses are starting to go.
Do you remember any real standout horses from that era that were something that you would watch? Or is this like a Boomernick era still? Or?
No, there's Boomernick's quite a bit later.
Gotcha.
I can't really think of just,
Yeah.
off the top of my head, some of those names and stuff. But yeah, there were certainly some horses that, had won some, were pretty solid horsemanship horses.
I guess I wonder back then if it was the trainer specifically that was being recognized versus nowadays it seems like we do a really good job of recognizing the horses as an equal or greater athlete. It seems like if what that type of relationship was, if it was this trainer did something, or if people were keeping track of, Bob rode this horse as a 3-year-old, but now Mike's got him at 7. And
I think this is really where that's starting to take off, where
Gotcha.
they're really starting to get, instead of having a horse and trying to make it into something,
Yeah.
they're trying to breed a horse to be something. That's kind of about the time
Absolutely.
that's coming around.
So what did horses look like for you graduating high school? Were you able to stick with it, or did you have to take any breaks and figure out what you were going to do with your life?
Yeah, there was a few decisions that I made at this point. Of course, I knew a lot of the trainers and stuff, so I considered becoming a trainer. But some of the summers that I'd spent, over at the trainers, and you spend 14 hours a day riding and that sort of thing, plus the feeding and stacking hay. Training horses is a tough job, and it's really not. I hate you call it a job, but it's really not a job. It's your life. You kind of then and now you really kind of can't be a partial horse trainer. Mm-hmm. There's no. Yeah, I train horses 8 to 5 days a week. I take 2 weeks off in the summer when I want to and stuff. It's and especially in Texas, you're up at 3 a.m. all summer, and and if you decide, I could use a little break from my horses. Well, you got thousands of dollars in equipment and trucks and trailers and barns, and it's just it's a huge commitment that and that's something that living in Lubbock and Texas Tech, and I talk to a lot of kids that are looking at what am I going to do, but they're kind of at that point in there, and I say, if you have an interest in it, then go work for somebody, you won't have any financial commitment at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It's all their, all their money in horses and tack and barns and trailers and all that stuff, and see what you think. And I think that'll make you or break you.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is all I want to do, or it's like, no. No.
It's like what do they say in Yellowstone? Yellowstone to Jimmy when he moves to Texas, like, you'll either love horses or you'll never get on one again.
Well, and with my thought is like, man, I don't know. I guess maybe I was not sure that I really wanted to do kind of nothing but horses. So that's maybe why I didn't move on into thought. I think I'm gonna go to college, get that rolling. I have options that way, and so I didn't do the horse training thing. This is a little bit of a bunny trail, but another thing that really interested me, maybe veterinarian work. I had, like I said, I had good grades in high school and stuff. But my best friend's dad was a vet, and I'd spent time down at their house and just staying over, visiting for times, and I even liked just for something to do, had traveled with his dad for a day or two, traveling to farms and treating animals and stuff like that. And this is maybe the kind of the time that it dawned on me that the animals are not so bad, but dealing with some of these people.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of my best friends are horse people and stuff, but I don't know that every animal person and I are completely compatible. You kind of you find your tribe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I don't think I want to do that. And then there's an opportunity. My dad was kind of doing some searching and always interested in what I'm doing and my really big a cheerleader, if you will, and found an option with an engineering school and applied there and got into engineering school. And it was that was a co-op with General Motors. So you would go to school for 3 months, you work for 3 months, and it swapped back and forth.
Okay.
Like that.
Was there any show relation, like a college team or anything you were a part of?
No, this was a pretty small engineering school, and I think there were some universities that had an equestrian team. They might do the horsemanship stuff, but there's no ranch horse teams or anything like this going on at this point. And you had ag. You could get an ag degree, which had horses, as part of your ag. But there really wasn't much in the way of a horse specialization.
Gotcha.
Or anything.
Did you do anything besides, like, did you ever like high school rodeo or junior rodeo or anything like that?
Yeah. So, I did most of my own riding with my horses and stuff, and took lessons, but we really didn't just send the horse to the trainer and leave it there. So if I go off to college and there's no option to take a horse, and so since I wasn't riding, my dad went ahead and sold the horse and all that. And so about this time, the movie Urban Cowboy had come out, and it kind of sparked, kind of like Yellowstone has kicked up, a big interest in what's going, all things Western. Urban Cowboy really hit it big.
Yeah.
And there were country bars opening up all over the place, and Western stores, and city people.
It was cool to be a cowboy.
And it was kind of cool to be a cowboy, and so at 18 you can go into the country bars, and so we go in there, and there was like maybe a group of horse people that I had known from, my showing and such. And, I go there and hang out with them, and they had the mechanical bull thing, and so of course we started riding that, and I got to be friends with the guy that's running it, and then another buddy that I knew, he rode, the contest horses, so I knew him and his family from, going to some of the local shows and that sort of thing. And he was already riding bulls, and it's like, hey, so there's this guy that bucks bulls, and we can go over there and we can go do this. It's like, hey, that sounds cool. So kind of went over and just, started doing that. And you're young and you're looking for adventure, and you kind of get the endorphin high from, adrenaline from all that. It gets a little addicting, and so had kind of started doing that. And at this time, you really didn't hear a lot. I mean, the western states, especially Texas, Oklahoma, were huge rodeo states. But even as an involved horse person, I didn't realize this, but county fairs all over Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia had rodeos, and there were contractors and stuff.
Yeah.
So kind of hitting the smaller circuit and stuff like that. And
how long did you do that for?
About 4 or 5 years.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, that's a pretty good stretch, really.
Yeah. And along this time, the engineering school and I didn't get along. I don't know. It was not something I was ready for.
Yeah.
It was a very tough school. And transferred down to Ohio State, and I ended up changing over to marketing, getting a marketing degree and stuff in there, and but mostly a rodeo degree. That was the focus. And if there's a rodeo, an important thing, for school, the rodeo was what occurred. And then at this time, there's a big Western store down there, Rod's Western Palace, and I worked for Rod Pressel at that. And
is this when you were helping make hats and all that stuff? Was it?
Yeah, we were selling hats and creasing hats, but we did whatever. He was, I learned a lot from Rod about kind of managing, the kind of the business environment, and work ethic was really, of course, my dad was a hard worker, and, I did all the barn chores at home, and we had as many as 17 horses when I was in high school. He boarded some horses, so a couple hours of chores every day. And that but really kind of the focus and like I said, that was a good experience working for Rod. And I really also had liked the Western wear industry, and thought, there might be some options here. Maybe I could start out and be a sales rep, something.
Where was this store located?
Columbus, Ohio.
Okay, so this is still in Ohio.
Yeah.
Is this a pretty well-known store?
Yeah.
Did in there working? Was it a pretty big crew, or how many people were you working with?
Oh, you might have as few as 3 on a Thursday night when they're open late, and there might be a dozen people working on a Saturday. And then also about this time, Rod's bought the Ryan's booth at the Quarter Horse Congress.
Okay.
Which the booth is as large as a lot of these, small Western stores in small towns.
Yeah.
So it was huge. I mean, it was
So you got to travel around and be on the road for that too. So you really got to see a lot of stuff probably.
That was actually, the Congress is in Columbus. So it's a couple miles down the interstate from the store,
Okay.
So, you're sleeping in your own bed
Yeah.
when you're working the stuff at the Congress. But yeah, that was kind of a big,
Did you ever, when you were in there, did you ever get to shape a hat or help make a hat for any big names or anything like that?
Oh yeah, there was. Especially at the Congress, people would bring the hat by, and it's kind of dirty and beat up, and they're for a fairly small fee. You would clean it. We'd pop them and sand them down a little bit, and then reshape them and stuff, and sell them. But there weren't. There were a lot of small Western stores back then, but like if you're a trainer in Southern Ohio, you might have a store that's nearby, but not much selection in that.
Yeah.
And so when you get to the Congress, you had the the higher X, bigger dollar hats and stuff like that. So we really sold a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of new hats, and so a lot of people and the major trainers and stuff were coming by that booth, or we weren't the only ones doing that, but they I can't think of who we did and who we didn't off the top of my head. But that was a normal thing.
Was being involved in that and still going to these events, was that starting to make you hungry to get back on horses and start showing again?
Well, I really enjoyed the rodeo years pretty well. And that was pretty fun, and I really had thought that I might want to do Western wear stuff, and I'd moved down to Lubbock. A friend had lived there, and so I just had a place to move into.
Yeah.
No rent.
And how old are you before we get too far? Is this early 20s, 21, 22 maybe?
This would be about like 23, because I just graduated college.
Okay, gotcha.
And then I moved down, and the Western wear industry changed. Prior to the change, the sales reps would have a line. You might have a Stetson hat line and a buckle line, and you travel to stores and you show them all the stuff, then place the orders on to the next store. And at this point, I was really kind of thinking I was having fun with that, and I liked the business, and thought that's what I wanted to do. And between my connections from Rods, and then when I worked at Lusky's, was at that time, a major, if not the major player in Western wear, through Texas with all their stores and stuff. But then the industry changed, and they have like an apparel mart in Dallas that opens, and all these places have just a booth. And so your buyers go there, and suddenly there are no sales rep jobs.
Yeah.
So, at this point, it's like, just working in retail is really not paying much. I mean, at this point, I haven't really not thinking about horses, because
I'm just trying to survive.
I'm working 6 days a week, and I have no money at all. Just, I pay my, my rent and make my car payment, and pretty much it. And I had fun.
Yeah.
I made good friends and had a good, good time with it, but it really wasn't, something for the future.
Yeah.
And then I started looking around for other things to do, and in pre-internet days, you get the local newspaper, and you look in the help wanted ads, and found an ad for. There's several things that I interviewed for that were just not going to be a good fit, and they wanted you to sell, encyclopedias and vacuums and stuff like that, and the multi-level marketing stuff had kind of started at that point. But yeah, I had an insurance company and claims, and I didn't really even know what that was when I went in for the interview. But I ultimately got a job there, so I was an insurance adjuster for 12 or 13 years, and from like my last year in retail, my last year full year in retail versus my first full year, the insurance company, I made about double the salary.
Oh wow!
So, and I was still on the lower budget, and so all of a sudden, hey, I've got money, and I only work 5 days a week, and so I was kind of hanging out with some friends with horses and, riding, I'd ride some of theirs and they might, go down to like a little ranch and do some day work or something. And I'd go along and, might ride somebody's horse together. And I don't know that much about that stuff. And I still really don't. But, just go along and have fun. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And a pretty nice Doctari came up for sale. Some people I knew were looking at it, and they kind of thought that it might be a little much horse for them. And it's like, man, I really like this horse, and it had done like some ranch cutting and stuff like that. So it was, pretty cowy. And at this point, I don't know anything about cattle. I really never. I had reined, but I had never done any cattle events. And my buddy knew cattle, and really all I knew about reining cow horse was that when I'd gone to Youth World 2 years, I'd watched it, and that was it. And I had a little bit of cash, and I had a place to keep the horse, and so I bought it. And then, like, well, what are we going to do? Should I? Really wasn't a reining horse per se, and it really didn't just really drag its butt and stuff. But, from my experience I got it doing, some of those things. And then I'm trying to think. I had gone to like the local cutting and ridden with a guy that had trained some cutters some, and had messed around with cattle when, if we went down to gather and brand or something.
Was that intimidating the first time you kind of stepped in and penned with cattle, or were you just so kind of, didn't know what to expect, that you were just didn't know what to expect?
At that point, I was too dumb about what I was doing to be intimidated. I mean, I'd been in the arena tons of times.
Yeah.
And, thousands of people watching and loud arenas and stuff. And then so we just went to Quarter Horse Show up in Amarillo, and they have cow horse, and you go in there and you do your reining pattern, which, I'm fine with that. I've done tons of them. And then, had the basics explained about boxing and going down the fence and stuff. And there's no video of that, but it would have to be just horrible, I mean, I didn't know anything about wanting to come around the corner with the cow, so you're rating, and I didn't know what rating was. You bounce the cow a little bit on one end, and then you shoot it down the arena, and off you went. But this gelding that I had was a runner. He was a smoking dude. So I can't imagine how much head start I must have given some of those cattle. And the arena in Amarillo, which is still there, was not that long. And this is like 1990-ish now, getting in the 90s. But I don't think I ever got outrun. He'd just blast down there and get by him, and and I'm probably sliding by and right coming back, and and I don't know that I really knew enough about wanting to be like mothered up with the cow to make a pretty circle and stuff. We just kind of get him to go one way and the other way, and off you go.
Yeah.
So, but also at this time, I think there was a guy in Canyon that did train some cow horses and border collies and cow horses, but that's pretty much it in West Texas. There just weren't. They'd have the show in Amarillo, but there wouldn't be a lot of people. You might have Colorado people or something might come down, or some Oklahoma. Or,
have you made a move down south now from Ohio, or?
Yeah, after I graduated from college, so that was like 85, 86.
Okay.
I had moved down.
Gotcha.
And the Luskies was here. Was in Texas. And then, got the insurance company job in Texas.
Gotcha. So here, I forgot to ask this earlier, and I don't know if this is going to take us back or not, but your dad was the president of the Southwest Reining Cow Horse Association? Are we to that point yet, or?
Yeah, we're kind of getting there. Dad,
Because you talked about he maybe wasn't writing a whole bunch, but he was certainly involved and supportive of it all.
yeah, and then like when we were in youth, he was president of Northern Ohio Quarter Horse a few years. He was treasurer of Ohio, which when you have the Quarter Horse Congress and thousands, I mean that's millions of dollars of horse shows. That's not that's pretty big deal there. So a lot of involvement there. And that was kind of always, it's kind of his thing. He was, he liked being the head chief in Indian Guys and stuff like that growing up. He always had that administrative and
what was he like? What kind of man was he? Because to seek out these leadership roles, I mean, that must say something to his character.
Yeah, I mean, we all speak highly of our fathers, but that was kind of he liked an involvement. He's a people person, and he loves to tell stories and things like that. And he's really has an interest in this, like the success of if we're showing horses, and he would want to see other people doing it and things go well and have a number of shows to go to.
Is that kind of rare still, or is the mindset of people changing to be more supportive? Because I know, especially on the rodeo side back then, I don't know about the horse show world, but it was a lot more cutthroat. People were really competing against the guy next to them and not just them and their horse or whatever, Was it like that with trainers, or do you think that maybe you just had better access to people because of your dad's level of involvement?
Well, no. I mean, I think we're kind of talking about two different subjects here.
Yeah.
Like with Dad's involvement in administrating, and running associations and stuff, there's not really a competitiveness to that. It's more of a cooperativeness. And even now, I mean, you've got people that are want to be on the board for NCHA or something, and kind of a give back, help strengthen the organization kind of thing. And I think that was his interest, that from more of a service end of it, to help ensure that things go well, and it's a worthy endeavor that he want to see.
Absolutely.
Move forward.
Did your family move down with you, or in a relative time frame?
Well, some years after I moved down, my sister and husband and their 1-year-old had moved down, and then my dad got an early retirement from the company that he'd worked for a long time, and had moved down and bought a place here by Stephenville and that.
Gotcha.
And so they're down here, and then by now I'm doing more cow horse showing, and I think I had started riding with one of the few cow horse trainers, Carl McQuistion, up in southern Oklahoma, and my folks moved down, and then of course they've always supported, always went to all the horse shows and stuff, and so they come to Abilene and watch, and they get interested. And like my mom historically worked entry booths, from 4-H through the quarter horse shows, and then that's kind of the kind of their interest. If I'm showing, and the association they can have some involvement with.
Are you still mainly in the AQHA type area, or are you starting to get into other associations more broader, becoming popular as well?
So at this point, there's really no NRCHA in Texas yet. I guess going clear back into the 80s, they had a small, Red River Cow Horse or something was going on, but it kind of had fallen by the wayside. Now, there were some people in Oklahoma and maybe a few in Texas that had trained some horses, and they'd go show the snaffle bit. and
Yeah.
that, but it was all, long distance kind of thing. But this there was a little bit of a resurgence, and what we were doing then, we go to the quarter horse shows, you get qualified for the AQHA World in Oklahoma City, and then you would go there and show. And so that was kind of, I guess, the goal and kind of the end game at that time. But then as more people kind of started doing that and the classes got bigger, and they had a group that was interested in trying to get more like NRCHA shows, just straight cow horse stuff. So they kind of formed a little group, and they held one show, and then that kind of, I guess that went well and was fun. And so then they decided to try to become an NRCHA affiliate, and that's where they got Southwest Ring Cow Horse going.
Gotcha.
And it's mostly like some trainers and some non-pros, and of course you have to have a president, a vice president, and all that sort of thing, and board members. And I don't know that anybody was really like just, oh, I want to be president kind of thing. And my dad kind of, with his experience, is like kind of nominated. It's like the general consensus was, well, why doesn't he do it? And, so
was he the first president of that association?
Yes, yeah, he did that he was president for a couple of years in that. But and so, and also, I mean, we all have our specialties. We have the things we know, and we have trainers that have been to the futurity and shown and done stuff, and they know all about that. But like, not everybody knows how to run a meeting. And my dad's pretty good on Robert's Rules of Order and stuff, and could keep the meeting. And I don't know if you've ever been involved in any horse associations, but the horse people in general, and trainers in particular, have a tendency to be pretty independent and outspoken, about things. And you can kind of have a meeting that just kind of turns into an argument, or at least a loud discussion. And I think it's important that there's somebody that has the meeting experience that can kind of keep it all together, and call on people to talk, and ask if there's a motion to be made, and go through the process and procedure.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, that's kind of how that started rolling. Then we started having some just straight cow horse shows, and there were some of the big name trainers, Teddy.
What sent you towards the cow horse? Because back then, to my understanding, the reining and the cutting were the big deals. So what got you to the cow horse versus the cutting when you started to kind of look other directions? Was it just the horse you had, that's what best suited it?
Yeah, that suited it. And, I'm still pretty, fairly young, and going fat, running wide open down the fence was, an appealing thing.
Yeah,
So
I guess after having a few years of riding bulls, you needed to kind of have some sort of elevated pace to keep up with that.
It was still fun, and certainly more tame than bulls were. But and I'd been around the cutting, but the cutting. I was pretty aware of that. Just having known some cutters in Ohio and stuff, and having worked flag and things like that. It's like, well, this really takes a lot more of a specialization, and you need to get on cattle to get that horse trained, which I didn't really have the access, and has continued to be an ongoing challenge.
What? So now we're kind of getting to a point where I wanna zone in and try and look into it as much as we can, because what my inspiration for wanting to sit down with you, especially coming from a non-pro and not being you're not a breeder with 10 horses,
Right.
and dropping and picking, and there's a lot more emotional investment in a horse. And trying to balance between a day job and making sure the money you're investing into this horse is worth the time and effort, and what helped keep you wanting to stay with the horses, and what kind of sacrifices you had to make to support it.
Well, yeah, there's a lot there. Especially in the earlier days, into the early '90s when I was showing. I was making better money than I did in retail, but it was still not, a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was still really trying to, at least for a few years there, trying to do it all on my own, and might even buy, like, go to the cow sale and get the cow buyer to buy me one cow and bring it home, and you work it a little bit. Just that was about the best that I could really do with my with the money that I had, and with
so you
facility.
had your own arena that you could hold a cow or custom horses in, or
Yeah,
you weren't having to commit to a trainer.
No, a good friend of mine was leasing a bunch of stalls and an arena and stuff.
Uh-huh.
So and I kept the horse there. So
Gotcha.
We had kind of found a way to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not nearly as tough, back then. Now everything is so precise that you really have to have regular cows access to your cattle to really get the kind of run that's going to, win anything, even a small show.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still a lot. I rented a duplex for a while, and then eventually bought a house, which was a good move in the long run. But you're paying your bills, and well, the company I worked for had a setup, where you could put money. Well, they changed it into a 401k at one point, but putting the money away for future retirement, and then then you have X amount of dollars that you could spend, and for from like 90 to like 02-ish, pretty much all those dollars were going toward the horse stuff. And later in that, I had ridden with some trainers and gotten some help on some of the horses, especially when I bought. We bred a horse, and then started as a 2-year-old, and then to the trainer as a 3-year-old, and then showed some small futurity.
Were you going through any number of horses trying to find to upgrade, or what type of volume of horses were you going through?
Well, so I pretty much just owned the one horse for about maybe 6 years, and then my dad had bought some horses from a guy that was showing, a couple guys that were showing cow horse, and one's a mare, and I showed her for a year, and then we bred her a few years. The first year was to Reminick, and then he also had bought from another friend like a 3-in-1 package. It's a nice mare, colt, or filly on her, and one in the oven.
Mm-hmm.
So then pretty soon we had 3.
Gotcha.
And Dad had 80 acres and built a barn and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you keep a lot of those horses there. And I would normally have 1, maybe 2 horses in Lubbock. And then, let's see, I got to keep them all straight here. So one of the horses that he bought, was the filly on the side. I had sold my gelding that I had shown for several years. I'd shown this mare, and we were gonna breed her. And I took this 2-year-old, and that was kind of my starter horse. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna, let's go do this. And then my buddy that had the facility, Paul, had had horse starting experience by this time and stuff, and I got a lot of help there. But we did round pen work and
So you were a little more involved versus what the style of it is nowadays, where a lot of people are either doing it all themselves or sending the horse off.
Yeah.
There's a little more middle ground there.
And something that I advise a lot of some of these the younger people coming up that I see at school and stuff, that buy a horse, train it yourself. Is it going to be as good as if you send it to the trainer? No. Are you going to make a lot of mistakes? Yes, you are. But you're kind of going to have to just get over that and do it to level up. So doing that, and the mare that I trained was not. She was a really sweet horse. She was not terribly talented, but she was very considerate and forgiving, and it was a really good horse to start with. And we did send her to a cutter for 3 or 4 months, to get her a little more hooked on cattle. So I did show her like in small futurity up at Ardmore, and just kind of to do it.
So in the kind of like what I was getting at earlier, where I guess you did have a little bit more access to facility and volume of horses than I would have expected. Not that it was substantial, like some of these breeders now are breeding. I mean, they're dropping triple digits amount of colts on the ground, and they can really cull through and pick what they're needing. There's a lot less of an emotional attachment versus to where if you have 1, 2, or 3 or 4 horses, I mean, you can do that in the morning. You can spend a lot more time with them, and they're probably more your buddies. As you got to sending horses to trainers and being more involved and getting lessons and all of that as an adult, and owning the horses and having the financial commitment to them to get them old enough to go to a trainer and stuff, was it hard to hear negative feedback from trainers, like as far as if you want to be competitive, this isn't the right horse? Or were trainers even doing that back then, or were they just happy to have someone there and every horse was the best horse maybe?
Well, so like that first horse that I did a lot of my own 2-year-old work and stuff on and riding, she turned into a really nice riding horse. And it really wasn't. I think that people were just. I didn't go in there thinking that, hey, this is the world beater. It's the best horse ever.
Yeah.
I think I came in with a realistic thought that I'm not a trainer, but I'm going to do this because I want to do one.
Yeah.
And so I had some more realistic expectations about what the outcome was going to be. And I don't know. I think I had. Well, one, there still really weren't very many trainers around. Not cow horse trainers, and so I didn't really get negative feedback per se. And then, like the second one that I showed, like I said, there was a mare that I had showed for a year. We did pretty well with her, bred her, and to Remenek, and that was a really nice little baby. So there wasn't negative feedback about that horse. And we started, Paul and I started as a 2-year-old, and went to the trainer as a 3-year-old, and then we hit a few, you know, the big futurity was still out west. We didn't go to that, but Ardmore and a Colorado futurity, and had fun, and we did some good things there. I mean, it's, you know, wouldn't have been, it's not so much, it wouldn't be so competitive today, but, you know, back in the day, the non-pro was not nearly as tough. And really, even in the open back then, if you were pretty good in 2 events, of the 3, you're pretty good shape.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I get by, you know, I can hold my cattle out, you know, in my herd work, and not have any disasters anywhere else. You know, you're at least in the mix there, even, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was you know, and there again, we're just kind of getting into narrowing down and fine tuning the breeding.
Yeah.
To create the horses that are doing more stuff.
Even looking into maybe not looking just at that time in your life, but over the course of your career in the show world and everything, you've been associated with a bunch of different trainers, I'm sure, and as the sports have all developed and gotten more specialized in the type of money and breeding and everything like that, do you ever remember a time where you kind of, like, it hit you like the game has changed and it requires a new caliber of animal?
Well,
like, was there any sentiment whenever you realized that you needed to level up, or did you ride out an animal until the end? Or
well, so it wasn't so much based on leveling up the animals as much as it was leveling up the horsemanship
okay.
on it. So, you know, through the 70s, we didn't really have bridling horses up. And, you know, you look at some of those old pictures of reiners, they're stopping and they're not really down in the dirt. They're kind of up on top, and the legs are straight, and the nose might even be up in the air a little bit, you know, as they're doing those long slides. And then, so, you know, that I quit that part of the showing and the reining. That was in the the 70s and up to about 80, and then college, and then several years of working after college before I had the money to buy that other horse. So now we're up into we're in the 90s.
Yeah.
And then at that point, then we're getting horses more bridled up, and that is kind of where West meets East, because you had the reiners that were really big in like Ohio, and a lot of those people were moving more Texas direction. And then you also had the West Coast people who were doing more of the vaquero style, and they had hack more horses, and then they going into bridle horses, you're bridling them up.
Yeah.
And you might see when you go to a show, world show in Oklahoma or something, and those two ends come together, you're seeing different horses come into there. So
did it ever seem like one style versus the other was quicker to take on habits from the other? Like, were East Coast type trainers more proud of their product versus West Coast, or was it just more individuals willing to reach out and start taking what they
I think
liked?
that was more of an individual to individual. I mean, there were some people that, I didn't really think much about this at the time. I'm kind of just right now reflecting back on
Yeah.
what I recall my observations. But you have people that are just hungry for learning more things.
Mm-hmm.
Something is different, and their first thought is, "Hey, that's different. What is this? And is this something that benefit me? Do I need to learn this? What are they doing? How do I do this?" Kind of thing. And then you always have people who are slower adapters, or they don't like the change, and
Yeah.
I don't like that, and it doesn't look right, and
It's real easy to get hung up in, well, this is the way we've always done it.
right, But so that was a change when I started, riding in the '90s. It's like I've got a lot of stuff that I don't know. That I got a lot of things I got to learn. And then, kind of circling back into some of the stuff you were asking about earlier, going from like say '90 to '02, where I work, I go to the barn, I ride, I pay my bills, and everything else is horses. I mean, it's even to the extent that, we had a lot of shows in Abilene, quarter horse shows, and did a lot of cow horse stuff down there. And they've got a lot more built into Abilene now. They used to just have the horse barn that we showed in, and then they had a little campground area. And I mean, I would pull in there, and I'd get a stall for the horse. And then I had a Suburban at one point, and I would sleep in it or throw the bedroll on the ground. Like one of my friends had a gooseneck with no living quarters in it. He just would have a bed in there. And there were, that was not an unusual thing.
Yeah, when we moved down here, in my gooseneck, I had when my grandma got moved into a care facility, she had a old futon pull-out couch, and I had this great big gooseneck trailer where it was just tall enough to where I could leave it in the nose and unfold it in the nose, and I'd have about 4 or 6 inches above my head when I'd wake up.
But yeah, really like with the quarter horse shows, the entry fees are lower. There's no money payback and stuff. So it's kind of lower dollar on that. And then it kind of got, in about '02, I was, at this point, I had my horse, if I had a horse locally, I had him at a barn with some good friends. And there's like a little 2-stall barn, with a little run on it, and I leased that. And then they gave kids lessons and did little jumping lessons and stuff. Mm-hmm. And they had a little arena there, and they took good care of it, but it was not very big, and it really wasn't conducive to stopping horses, and certainly no cattle.
Yeah.
And I was kind of getting a little burnt out with just, work and horses. Sold, that last filly that I'd shown in the little futurities. And then I took a break for about 12 years.
Oh, really?
Just so I could do some other things. And
was it difficult when you had that break from college and the horse showing, after having some relatively good success as a teen, and coming back, getting into the show horse world after this gap of change in the sport itself? Was there some frustration there as far as having to make up ground to get competitive again?
Yeah, it. I mean, like I have said that I've learned to ride 3 times. So in the '70s I had to learn to ride that way, and then in '90 I came, coming back from about 10 years of not really riding. And now we've got a lot more bridle up, and the horses are going to stop deeper, mm-hmm. and and trying to learn how to read a stupid cow and, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, there was a whole, and also having won, some major events and been really, kind of a top dog in youth reining. And then I had some success in amateur cow horse, but nothing like that. I mean, I went to the AQHA World and made finals in amateur cow horse one year. But, certainly I was not a contender to win.
Yeah.
That. So there's...
But having enough wins to still make it enjoyable then.
Yeah. And then we had started the NRCHA stuff, and you're winning some money there, and like I've got these Rod Tusher Spurs were year-end non-pro award, and
Gotcha.
some stuff like that. So that there's still some some success.
Yeah,
there.
absolutely.
You just
So what made your mind to take this second break? I know you said you were kind of getting burnt out. Was it just death by 1,000 cuts, or was there any one instance that really pushed you over the edge?
Not really any one particular thing. It was just kind of losing the drive.
Yeah.
It's in a few years prior to that, it's like you're kind of in a hurry. You want to get done with work so you can go ride, and you're kind of getting where I don't know about. You're less excited about riding, less excited about going to shows, and stuff like that. And
We had kind of talked about earlier. We mentioned like it was like cool to be a cowboy, and like the urban cowboy come out when you got into like the bull riding stuff. Does this coincide with kind of where like you see the drop off of there's not as many westerns, and like is there any type of that to where like kind of the glamour to it disappeared? Maybe not maybe that had nothing to do with it, but kind of a similar timing.
Well, the urban cowboy thing kind of ran through into the later 80s.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really probably to some extent had slowed down. The peak of it had dropped before, by the time you got into the 90s.
Yeah.
And I, at this point, I'm pretty set in, who I am, cowboy wise.
Yeah, because now you've got to be in your late 20s, early 30s now when you take this second break, or?
Yeah, well, let me think. Well, I'd be like late 30s.
Okay.
I'm, now we're like 40. I'm like
okay.
40-ish. So, and, I just, it was hard. It's hard to, I guess it was hard just getting to where it was hard for me to try to put all the time and all my money into it when I just didn't have the excitement about it. It was just, I just have done it and I've done it and I've done it. And then, it was just a little less fulfilling, I guess, at that point. So kind of took a break there and, did some other things. And
at this time, just because it's going to kind of tie into some stuff I want to talk about in a little while, before you took this other break, were you starting to see more added money and incentive type programs like we see today, like where there was an opportunity for people to make a little bit of money in it, or was it still more maybe you make your fees back type?
It was starting to get that way. They still really didn't have big added money. And this is still before like they're moving any major events, futurity or anything this way. But now, this is about the time that I've taken my second break, is about the time a lot of the West Coast trainers had started moving to Texas. Just for a lot of reasons. It's much more cost effective to be in Texas, and, they started seeing how much, the move was going to benefit them. So, it's kind of funny that I'm highly involved in it at the kind of the grassroots of the growth of ring cow horse in Texas, and then I drop out, and as it really, blew up.
And so coming back must have been a pretty big shock compared to the sport you had left and what you came back to.
Yeah, and then I got where I was missing it and started talking, to. We really don't have internet sales much yet per se, but this would be like 2014. Well, 2012, 13. I'm kind of like missing it and want to get back in. And I've got some friends that are involved in cutting and cow horse stuff and talking with that. Yeah, I'm really kind of missing it. And a friend of mine calls me, and at that point he was buying coming 2-year-olds for prospective cutters and with a goal of he wants to ride them as 2-year-olds and then wanted to sell them for the big 3-year-old prospect kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he called me up and said, "Hey, I have found a horse for you. It's not really going to meet my program. If you want a cow horse, I think this is the horse." And he's a pretty horse savvy guy, and so I go over and look at it, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I like this horse." So I got him and brought him back, and I rode him like I bought him in mid of the 2-year-old year. I rode him as a 2-year-old, and then a friend had recommended Zeb Corvin. Kind of looking for someone to ride. I mean, I'm in Lubbock, so there's a lot of trainers that are out, Gainesville, Marietta area, but nothing very close. I recommended Zeb, and so I go up there and ride and had the horse up there and really got along well up there with his program. And so then that horse is just a lot of fun. Oh my gosh, he just he was a lot of fun to ride.
Yeah.
And then not only doing the cow horse stuff, but I'm riding him at home where I don't have cattle and I'm doing other things. Now there's ranch riding that didn't exist before. You've got versatility ranch horse stuff that didn't exist before. And the cow horse, in that 12 years, and especially with all the trainers that had moved into Texas, had leveled up dramatically. So I come in here and I'm like, wow, I am almost like starting over again. So, I and something that I've always kind of done, even when I started as a trainer, is that I kind of like to mix it. If the horse stays with me all the time, the horse doesn't develop as much as I need it to. But if the horse stays with the trainer all the time, I don't develop as much as I need to. So I kind of try to find the happy middle point in there. And it limits how good the horse can get because it's not at the trainer and not on cattle all the time. But if I didn't do that, I would just be wretched in the show pen.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have any riding skills. So
well, and there's probably a lot to be said for just being in time and comfortable and having the right feel with your horse.
Sure.
And versus having a horse that's broke as hell, but you don't know where the buttons are.
Yeah. And so, as someone who has spent a lot of their life with cattle, they're second nature to you. But for those of us that didn't, it's like, like as men, we have a struggle to figure out women, and then you have yet a whole other kind of, horses, but you have a cow, and it's like, what in the world is going through this thing's brain, and how do I, unravel the mysteries and stuff? And
absolutely, yeah. Shoot, even like I just a couple weekends ago went to my first show in Ardmore, and I'm pretty comfortable in cows. I've been around a lot of them. The last 10 years, all I've really done is cowboy and run equipment and a bunch of little random stuff if I really needed a stack of cash that just cowboy wouldn't give me. But, I wound up with a 70 in the reining and a 60 in the fence work, which, I was more focused on making sure I got my lead changes done because I'd never changed a lead until I come to work for Cody, at least not on purpose. And even knowing how to read cattle and having a good eye for them, because I've been around quite a big number of them over the last several years, but translating it from what my mind is telling me to my hands to a horse, and the amount of responsibility that's put on these horses now is so tremendous. Like the type of animal that I was around before coming to Texas, like I had to have my thumb on them all the time. One, because they may do something stupid and get me hurt, but two, there was no cow in them. They were all grade. There was a good chance that this horse had never been sat on until it was 6 years old, And so it's been a pretty big change for me that way too, and kind of relearning how to establish my feeling with a cow to the horses. But as you had got back into this first horse, you got it at halfway through its 2-year-old year. So you're kind of training it yourself, sending it back and forth to a trainer in there, getting lessons from some people, I'm assuming, to stay on cattle. Are you really struggling to get back in time with what these people are doing now after that big of a break? Because I'm sure this second time the game has changed a lot more than the first.
Yeah. One, it took me a while to kind of just get my horse legs back to where I was really part of the horse and not, I was really kind of surprised how awkward I had gotten over that time period in my riding. But so really kind of the big challenge became that, but like in the 90s, as a non-pro, and you're doing your a fraternity or derby horse, and you're cutting cow and you hold all three, you're in reasonably good shape. Well, now the non-pros are at least the upper half of them, in 2014 are cutting like full-fledged cutters are. So at that, I've got to learn. I basically can't learn to cow horse and ranch cut. I've got to learn to cut. So that's a whole level to come up. And then even like the fence work, we're really, even through the 90s, a lot of it was like, make sure you hold in the boxing, try to get a couple turns, and then get your circles. But, now it's really the full control, where you're really, okay, I'm going to educate this cow a little bit. And now I know I got to get my read right. And there's just so much more to it that, it's down to it's really being fine-tuned now.
Was there any type of ego? You don't strike me as someone who's ever been very over egotistical or anything, but having some success being younger, maybe not to the world, but in your own head, were you ever like, what the hell, man? Like, we're better than this. What the hell? Like, was there any of that ever got to you a little bit?
There's times where it's like, man, I don't, I should be able to do better than this. This went wrong and that shouldn't happen. And, I think that the whole process, is pretty humbling. Even if you get the horse right, then the cow will humble you.
Yeah.
So, you kind of just, I think I just try to focus on what I'm trying to do. And kind of and here's something that kind of circles back. Different people have different mindsets, and not the same thing works for everybody. There's a lot of, you go clear back into the when I was riding bulls, and you had, psycho-cybernetics, power of positive thinking was kind of a big, new thing, and it's like, yeah, I am gonna ride this bull, and there's just no other thought except that this is going to be successful, and there's people that have that, in the show pen, and they visualize their reining run, and this is how it's going to happen, and it works for them, and they can make that work sometimes. That never worked for me. If I'm thinking that I'm going to ride this bull, I didn't. And if I'm just confident that I'm going to get, my rundowns are really going to be great, or I'm going to get this cow handled, I don't. So I've got more of a clear my mind and focus. So that was the same thing, like some of my, and I was never really that good of a bull rider. I had maybe 1 year in college that I did okay. But, so that's there was no real ego building, going on from that either. But just having a clear mind and focus was kind of my thing.
Yeah.
And so, like when I'm going in there showing, and I've got thoughts about, what my horse does and doesn't do, and I kind of got to watch for this, and make sure I'm, if I've been rushing something, I want to slow it down, or there's adjustments and stuff in there, but I'm not. You're just kind of clear-minded and trying to work, do your, you've trained for it, and just go execute it, and not.
Do you, as you come back into this second transition back, so and which runs all the way into now, there hasn't been another break to current time. Have you been through an amount of horses again in this third round of it?
No. I bought the gelding in 2014, and I'd had him for, I don't know, 8 years-ish. And then I had bought like this mare that I'm showing now as a 2-year-old, and futuried and derbied her and such. The only other thing that I did, in like 2015-ish, I bought a cutter, and the thought process on that was that I'm not, like I said earlier, I need to learn to cut, and I'm not making good cuts, and I've got this young horse, and I'm just not able to think about what the horse needs to do, and it's just too much.
Yeah. So,
I had an opportunity to buy just a really nice, solid gelding, kind of a, the 71 kind of horse, if you will. And I showed him for a year. And I mean, we had a few things might go wrong, but generally we were 71s and 2s over and over. And it kind of got, my, prior to that, my herd work was somewhat horrendous. And, I got it where it wasn't terrible anymore. I don't claim to be, any guru or anything in there, but I still have, some things go wrong, and, I don't make some cuts and stuff, but I can get out there and I can make some good cuts, and I have had some good runs. So that was something that I did, and I didn't. Really sweet horse. I'd love to still have him, but I just don't have the budget.
Yeah.
To have really more than one at a time. So
has that made you, as your circumstances and locations and just the practicalities of life has developed into the world now versus when you started as a kid, have you become, because I'm noticing like this third time, like you don't have the volume of horses, and I wonder, is that just due to the amount of money that's been poured into the industry and things are more expensive, or were you becoming more intentional in the horses you got and didn't need to shop around or mix it up a bunch? Because like as I'm seeing it, like you had the horse that brought you back into the game, but then hey, over here in the herd work, I need to work on this, and you made an intentional decision to change horses and focus on that, and then you come back to the cow horse, and that's when you into this mare that you have now, right? So I'm noticing that now it seems to me you've had, some life experience and are looking at this and making moves to better yourself and set yourself up for success. So are you just becoming more intentional in the animals you're buying?
Yeah, well, so like the animals from in the 90s kind of fell into my lap. And there weren't just a large number of cow horses and stuff at that point. Like some of the breeding like Tereminic and stuff was very intentional, but, like a couple of the other horses Dad bought, a friend had them and they liked the horse and he bought it, and then I showed the horse and that. So it was available, and it was something that would have been, it was a quality animal for what I was, attempting to do. And then, now I don't really have, my dad doesn't have horses and stuff, so I don't have family horses to just pick up and go. And, there's a much larger market now between cutters and cow horses and such, that as you're looking around to find, well, what do I want? And, since it's tougher, you've got to find, you kind of have to level up in your horse too.
Yeah.
Or you really, don't stand much of a chance.
See, I may be coming from an uneducated point of view here, but from what I think I'm understanding when I listen to other people talk about it, and what I'm starting to notice and pay attention to what these horses are as far as breeding, and these types of horses ride this way, and dispositions, or certain types of something that has more draw, or something that's more forward, or a lot of cow, or blah blah blah. I'm noticing it's maybe not like all these horses are athletic and capable, but now it's like, what type of habits and consistency am I bringing, or my horsemanship, that's making the difference? And as a non-pro, to be a part of a good program, I imagine is equally as important as the horse maybe now, because there's so many horses that are athletic and have the components, but something that you can get along with, and the right program and influences in the way you ride the horse are probably making a big difference now versus before.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of on that lines, part of that is finding the horse that fits you. Some of those top open riders have some impressive horses, and they do have some impressive runs. But when I watch them, it's like, I wouldn't want that horse, because my hands are not that, consistent, and my release timing is just not, I just don't think my release timing is good enough. That horse would just blow up on me.
Yeah.
I'm just, those are riders that have a natural born skill set, and they've worked hard at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they can just do, kind of the Michael Jordans of the horse industry. They have the gift, and they've developed the gift. And whereas I don't know that I'm not terribly natural at anything. Most of what I do, I've really just worked hard at and developed a skill set on. So, I need to find a horse that's going to be a little more forgiving if I'm a little too quick. I'm thinking about my cow, and I'm, being a little rough on my horse, or, something on that lines.
As you look, if you were to look back on the trainers and the way a lesson is delivered, granted, you're also looking at it as now someone with a lifetime of experience and a grown man versus a very involved child at one point in your life that is seeking out this type of help. But do you notice a just in general a different type of mentality in the way a lesson's delivered? Like, do you feel like you're getting a bigger picture, or were people in these disciplines a little more willing to divulge what they were really doing to get a horse to do something? Or
Well, so I mean, something kind of thinking what you're getting at here. I think that, and I've listened to podcasts myself, and some of the longer time trainers talk about the difference between, maybe going back 70s and earlier, where, trainers were hiding things from each other, and they certainly weren't riding together. And then, now trainers go to other trainers' houses and they're riding. Hey, what do you think? And they get on each other's horses and stuff. And I think really as a non-pro, and I've been taking lessons, essentially from trainers, my whole life. I don't know that that's really the case. I think that, any of the trainers that I've ridden with have been pretty open about what we want the horse to do and how we're trying to get the horse there and that sort of thing. But there again, the trainer's not really worried about me stealing all their customers.
yeah, that's true.
They're just trying to, they have a more vested interest in if I'm out there, I come to them and then I go show and I'm better. That reflects well on them.
Yeah,
so
I was going to say, to a capacity, you represent them as a...
Yeah, now there is, there's some differing methods of teaching that I've encountered over the years. It kind of started out with the 4-H and low level stuff, and people were pretty quiet and, trying to build confidence and encouraging and stuff. And then, kind of ran through, I had some trainers that I rode with that were more old school football coach style. And they're highly enthusiastic about trying to get you to do these things. And I mean, you mess up and you tell you to do something and you go out and you just don't do that. And, they're cussing about it and stuff. But it wasn't like, I never saw that as being tearing me down. It's that they're just so passionate about wanting you to do better. It's like, it's right here. You just do this.
Yeah.
And then you don't do it. Yeah, you got to do that. And, and sometimes it's like, they keep that focus in there until you get it where you're really doing the right thing.
Was there ever one trainer or someone, maybe they weren't any horsemanship influence on you that really stands out, that the way they communicated or what they were trying to communicate, someone that really stands out that was a big influence or role model in your horsemanship? There's to me, it's really a lot of blocks for the most part. I don't know. I mean, if I started naming names, I'd leave some out that were pretty influential. And I mean, there were trainers that I officially rode with, and some people I went and took a lesson or two with, and even, I've had helpful hints along the way. Like I'm in youth and showing, and there are other people that have, training some horses and stuff, and, they're showing in the open, and then I show in the youth, and hey, Mike, on your lead change,
throwing something out there. Oh, okay, thanks a lot. Just, I feel like that there's just been, a large number of people that over the years have, been extremely helpful and sometimes it's not some of the concepts and stuff. Someone explains it one way, and you kind of get part of it, and someone else explains it a different way, and then maybe even you.
So after we've gone through these lessons and you've come back this third time and you've got to this last horse that you have, what was the a quick kind of journey with this horse as far as when did you get it? What type of program did it go through, and how did we kind of wind up with Cody and Emily to come full circle?
Well, let's see. I bought her as a 2-year-old. The guy that had owned her started her and did a good start on her. In maybe the middle of her 2-year-old year, I sent her straight over to Dusty Whitford, 2-year-old guy, and especially cutting. And, he spent the rest of the 2-year-old year. And really, I mean, my goal there is I want a horse that's really hooked on a cow, because my horses can't live at the trainers on cattle all the time. They come home for a month or two at a time and don't get on cattle, and then I've got to get them back on cattle and get them tuned back up before I go show. So I need a good solid. I mean, I really need cow to. When the cow stops, that horse just stops.
Yeah.
Now we got other things we got to fix, but I gotta have the basics. And then Dusty only does the 2-year-olds, and I was kind of looking for someone to ride her as a 3-year-old, and I think that's when Cody and Emily, about the time that shortly after that I bought this mare, or about that time, they started working on the same facility as Dusty, and then he had me take a few lessons from Cody, and I thought that was a good fit, and it was working out, and it and as a non-pro, you kind of want to feel good about the idea that what the trainer is doing and what you want to do will kind of be a good fit. There are trainers that are great for one person and don't work as well for another, and vice versa. So that's something that I would recommend if you're non-pro, and there's a trainer and you may want to ride with them. See if you can take a couple lessons from them.
Yeah.
And just go and see kind of how the fit seems to be. You might find someone that's like, this is just not, for one reason or another, not really happy with the direction.
Do you think that aside from just maybe the style of riding, everybody kind of rides a little bit different, and I'm sure it helps if you ride similar to someone or can at least take their direction, but do you think it also just a little bit more than that, just being someone that's pleasant to be around, and do you think that makes a difference in your ability to retain what is being taught?
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, if there's a lot of trainers now. I mean, there's a whole generation that's coming up that are some of these young guys and ladies that are really good. There's kind of no reason to ride with a trainer you don't like.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
I mean, there's and especially in cow horse, because there's just so many nice people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just in my profession in the insurance world, I'd kind of gotten tired of people, but I still like the cow horse people.
Yeah.
They're for the most part, they're pretty enjoyable people to be around. But and I mean, people that you like and that you be around. I mean, it also kind of depends. Like with Cody and Emily, we've got to be pretty good friends, and but now there are other people that are that have a more business mind. You know, so, you know, like with me, I like the process. I kind of like the 2-year-old. I don't really like riding 2-year-olds, but I like the younger horse and watching it grow and develop, and you kind of see where you go. I mean, just like, you know, there's some people who are owners. They like owning a horse and they want to see the horse do good. Riding doesn't really matter to them. And then there's people, you know, I'm a non-pro and I like, you know, in some cases we like riding the horse and showing. In some cases we really enjoy the showing part and are not that concerned about the process. And, you know, there are trainers that are really focused on having the horse really ready when you walk in the show pen. And I kind of like developing a good horse. You know, I mean, I want to do well in the show pen, but I really want a horse that, like, you know, someone that's maybe not so knowledgeable, I can just hand them the lead rope and off they go. And, you know, the horse knows more than just its job in the arena. It's just turned into a really nice horse.
Absolutely.
And, you know, that's kind of a good fit, I think, you know, here where, you know, the mare took longer than I really wanted to come around. But I mean, we could have pressured her harder and she might have come around faster. She might have come apart too.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
You know, and that's one thing with me. I just don't, my skill set, when I've developed a good horse, it's because I put a lot of time into it. I don't really have the timing and the knowledge of really how to pressure a horse to make it
absolutely
elevate quickly. You know, not my forte. So.
Well, I've got one more question, and we'll wrap this up. It's getting late, but after this lifetime of experience and seeing so many different things and the evolution of the entire Western performance industries, if you were to give kind of a piece of advice to people who are in some form following a similar trajectory of their involvement as you, and the way that the industry has changed and evolved into being such a confusing and high-paced thing that it is now. I mean, it is just an animal of an industry. What is something that you think people overlook when they start thinking about getting involved that you would say just something to really look out for or be aware of to people trying to get involved that you think could save them some headache?
Well, I kind of have two thoughts on that line. One is you kind of you need to make some determinations about what it is you want. You know, you can, as the saying goes, you can have anything you want in life, you just can't have everything you want in life. So there's always, you know, I mean, if, you know, like if you just, all you care about is owning a futurity winner, there's ways to do that, you know, to really, I mean, you can't guarantee it, but there's certainly ways to encourage that, and it takes a lot of money to do so. And not, even if you do, you may not, because there are a lot of people doing that, and some of them are never going to win. There's just not enough futurity winning, you know, there's only one a year. So, but part of it is just kind of, you know, you want to figure out what you want, and then you kind of got to figure out who's going to be good to work with, that's going to, you know, make an enjoyable experience out of it, if that's what you're looking for.
Absolutely.
Or whatever. Just trying to be realistic about your, you know, your expectations and the money you're going to spend, and what's the most important part to you. You know, because it'd be nice to, I'm going to have a horse that's just so sweet, and I love having the horse, and the trainer is just the nicest people, I have so much fun, and I win every time I show. You know, it's, no.
Sounds like a pretty good fairy tale to me.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's completely unrealistic, and you kind of need to figure out what that is. You know, another thing that I think is probably on this lines and is a tough subject is how people even start the journey. and like, so I keep my horse out at Texas Tech, and, they teach, they've got equestrian teams and ranch horse teams and rodeo teams. They teach colt starting and ranch horse basics. And they even have a horsemanship 1 class where they got some school horses. And last summer, I like to ride in the morning. And, they're doing the horsemanship 1 class. And it's a good friend of mine that teaches it. And they start with basic. It's like, how do you put the halter on? And how do you brush the horse? But I mean, if you're a city kid and you love horses, you don't know those things.
Yeah.
And, you spent most of your life around horses and stuff is second nature, as it is with me. But these kids are just, they don't know anything about the horse. And you're talking, an animal that's over 1,000 pounds and potentially highly dangerous, Yeah. So, you just can't, as a city person, go buy yourself a horse and a trailer and show up somewhere and buy a horse and know what you're buying and go do it. You've got to find somewhere to get started. So, and with me as a kid, we kind of grew up out in the country, and people had 5 acres and they had a couple horses. And really, my grandparents' era, most people were in agriculture. So they weren't necessarily, horse people and bought and sold and showed and stuff, but they were around horses.
Yeah.
And so they, and if you're a kid, and in the city you may not, but maybe somebody you went to school with had horses, and if you really loved them, you could find some sort of connection, and you could hang out with them, and there used to be more just places that you could go and take lessons as a kid, and there's fewer of those now. But if you're really beginner and you want to get in, talking to your county extension agents and stuff to try to find some local people and and that sort of thing, and trying to get started. But like a city person that doesn't know anybody that knows anything about horses,
got to be willing to start somewhere, and it's usually at the bottom.
Like, you want to learn to dance, you can look it up in online to the studios, and you want to learn to play tennis, there's places for that. But you can also buy a tennis racket and some balls and go to smacking balls around, and you don't learn how to do it right, but you don't going to get hurt.
Yeah.
But with the horse thing, between the danger and the expense and everything, you really, it's kind of a tough deal. So
yeah.
It is. I do like some of the tech's program for students where they can learn to brush a horse.
Yeah,
and things
absolutely.
like that, and at least encourage. And and then you've talked a lot about the money and everything in the industry, but so one thing that kind of happens is 40 years ago, the cow horse deal was not as tough, like I was saying. And if you could do 2 events, you were pretty good, and you find a way to get by the 3rd event, and you're winning money. And now it's big money, and like if you're riding with top trainers, it's expensive. Buying the horse is expensive, and everything else is expensive. And if you're going to have futurity or derby horse, you got all the practices you got to spend money to go to, and et cetera, et cetera. But you don't have to start there, especially if you're showing, like you've got in Texas, there's a Stock Horse of Texas, and they kind of specialize in catering, the William and Jill and the people that run that association. They really cater to and encourage people that ride backyard horses and stuff. You ever wanted to show? Come. You can come. And if you have questions, ask people.
Absolutely.
And, they really encourage that. And, you don't want to buy a horse and then go to an event, Rain Cow Horse event, or, one of the big cutting events over there, and walk up to the top trainer and start asking him a million questions.
Yeah.
Those guys and ladies are riding a lot of horses. They're very busy, a lot of focus and stuff. But you can go to the shot and you can get started there.
Yeah.
And I think that just knowing that sort of thing can be a very helpful thing to people. Or, there are a lot of people that do trail riding, they ride on ranches and stuff, and they can ride a horse fine. They just don't know anything about the show pen. And, you've got your ranch horse association springing up and having competitions, and there's outlets there. And I think that for the most part that you get there and you start talking to people, you're going to run into some people that are both knowledgeable and quite willing to help and stuff.
Absolutely.
So the big thing on that is just be willing to talk to a lot of people if you have an interest, and you'll start finding a way.
Absolutely. So. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap it up, and I really appreciate you spending this evening hanging out and talking with us, and hopefully this does some good for somebody. And, we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.